About 10 years ago, I was working as a waitress at a local diner and living in a low-income apartment. The apartments were brand new and beautiful. To this day, it was the nicest apartment inside that I've ever lived in. I lived on the 3rd floor. Outside, it looked nice-ish as well. The landscaping was kept up and they had these tall and thick, pretty flowering hedges that wrapped around the building. But due to some drug activity, it wasn't always the safest. It was normal to see needles burned up and bent spoons, condoms and all that kind of stuff. We also lived right on a river close to a downtown area. Less than a mile away there were some homeless shelters and a place called the Daily Bread where anyone in need could go for a meal. So it wasn't unusual to see homeless people on the road outside of my apartment complex or sleeping on benches by the playground. They never bothered me. I usually worked mornings at my job, but every once in a while I would fill in for someone on the swing shift, 4 till 11 PM. I usually kept my tips in my apron for a few days and then deposited the money on my way home. This particular Sunday, our busiest day, I had worked the morning shift and done really well. So when I heard they were short-handed for swing shift, I volunteered to work a double. I ended up doing really well on that shift as well, and clocked out at 9:30 with about $250 in my apron. I stopped at the bank to make a deposit through the ATM and got home at around 10:15 PM. I pull up and see that I have a spot fairly close to the stairwell. It's dark, but I can see that there's no one else around. I park and walk past the hedge and turn right to go up the stairs when, out of the corner of my eye, I see a man between the hedge and the building. I look to the right and I can see that he is smoking a cigarette, wearing jeans and a black shirt, and he is covered in paint, like he was a house painter. He looked like he was on drugs. Wide-eyed and a little crazed. He saw me look at him. I felt creeped out because I had not seen him from my car and I was wondering why he was standing out of the light and hiding behind the hedge. So I start to take the stairs 2 at a time. I get to the top of the first flight of stairs when I hear someone following me. I look back and it was the man. We make eye contact and he is already halfway up the stairs and running at me. I start running too and freaking out internally because even if I beat him upstairs, I might need to unlock the door. My roommate and I usually keep it locked. I keep running as fast as I can. When I get to the top of the 2nd flight, he was like 4 steps behind me. I run harder and debate screaming for help. I get to the top of the 3rd flight and I'm still 15 feet from my door and he is almost on me. I can hear him breathing hard. His eyes are bulging. His arms are outstretched to grab me. He's a foot away from me. My apartment was still 10 feet away. I inhale and open my mouth to scream as loud as I can for help. My 6'4", buff as fuck construction worker neighbour opens his apartment door to come out for a smoke. I let out a scream that starts in horror, but trails off in relief as my neighbour sees what is happening and starts running to me. The man turns right around and sprints off. My neighbour chases him to the 2nd floor and then runs back up and yells for his girlfriend to call the police. At this point, I am a hyperventilating, crying and shaking puddle on the ground. My neighbour comforts me and gets my best friend / roommate to come help me. I thought that man was going to catch me and hurt me. Looking back, it's more likely that he was trying to rob me because I was still wearing my work apron and it was late. We made a police report and the cop told us that a day labour company for the homeless had a painting contract that they were currently working. Cops made a point to start doing more drives through our complex. My roommate and I bought mace and started calling each other to come watch the other person come upstairs if it was dark at night when we got home. So, to the man covered in paint and hiding in my hedges, let's never meet again. I don't know why I had the sudden urge to share this story. I think it's because the more that I think about it, the creepier I find it. This happened to me last winter. I was home from school for break, and I had just started seeing this girl, Sophia, who I went to high school with. She's amazing, and we had some good times together. Sophia is a self-described adventure addict. She loves going places and doing exciting and adventurous stuff. So, for our third date, I took her to an infamously haunted place in my hometown. I don't want to say the name of this place, as it has some national recognition, and I don't want to give away where I live. It's basically a long winding road that ends at the ruined foundations of an ancient house. There are a bunch of stories as to why this place is so haunted, and most are about what you'd expect. Man goes crazy and murders family before committing suicide. Supposedly, the closer you get to the foundations, the more haunted things become, and you'd see things like shadow people. You'd hear disembodied voices, or you'd even possibly get pushed or scratched. I'd gone there once before with my friends. Needless to say, nothing happened to me. I figured that this date would be the perfect combination of romantic and exciting. It seemed to work, because Sophia was really excited, having never done it before. I picked Sophia up and drove to the road. It was about a 20-minute drive from her home, which gave us plenty of time to joke around about the situation. She made fun of me for bringing a large knife with me. I did it because I lurk on this subreddit and listen to creepy stories all the time, and they've instilled in me a healthy case of paranoia. We eventually came to and turned down the road. The road is in the country, at least a 20-minute drive from the town, with only a few scattered houses along it. When you turn onto it, it's relatively normal, with maybe 3 or 4 houses spread out along 2 miles or so. When you reach the end of it, there will be a small section, just big enough for 1 or 2 cars to park in and turn around. From here, the actual haunted part of the road was closed off by a gate, so you'd have to continue on foot. We got out, and I made sure to take my knife with me. The journey down the road was actually rather peaceful. The road was creepy as hell, don't get me wrong, but with the fallen snow reflecting just enough starlight and distant city lights, it was actually rather romantic. Sophia was clinging onto me. I don't think she was actually scared, she was more just using the situation as an excuse to do that. We made it all the way to the foundations and back again without any real incident, at least none that we noticed. When we were about a quarter of a mile from my car, I almost jokingly said to her, "You know, if we sat in the car to make out for a while, it would be like the start of every horror movie ever made." Sophia smiled and gave me a look. "I'm game if you are," she said, grabbing my arse in an exaggerated manner. Needless to say, we hurried back, and one thing led to another, and we were falling around in the back of my car. Because it was the middle of winter, the windows were fogged up to hell. It was extremely obvious what was happening. When we were nearly finished, Sophia saw headlights coming down the road. This had happened a bit earlier, and it was just someone coming home. They wouldn't have noticed us though, because the closest house was easily half a mile away, and we were positioned so that trees and undergrowth were almost completely blocking our car from view. The only way you'd be able to see us is if you pulled up into the small section where we were parked. But the headlights didn't turn away, which could only mean that this person was coming over to where we were. Sophia was getting worried. She was very career-driven, and getting in trouble for having sex in what is technically a public place would definitely ruin her aspirations. I assured her that we were safe, and that it was most likely just more teenagers coming down here for a bit of thrill-seeking. I used my forearm to clear away some of the fog from the windows, and we watched. It was still foggy, but at least we could see. We calmed down a bit when a bright blue truck pulled up only a few feet behind us. At least it wasn't a cop car. This moment of relief, however, was broken when the driver got out. It wasn't a teenager, and he was completely alone. It was a large, older man, and I swear on my mother's grave that I saw him holding something. I don't know what it was, but in the dark and through the fogged windows, I swear that it looked like an axe. The man then walked towards the window of the car. Being absolutely done with this, I flung myself to the front of the car, started it, and floored it. I only had just enough space to turn around and fly out of there. If I had been pulled up only a little bit further, then I'd have been completely boxed in. So I was doing all of this completely naked, which, looking back on it, was kind of funny. Sophia joined me in the front seat, also naked, and we strained to see through the fogged up windshield. What we were doing was incredibly dangerous, but we both just wanted to get away from that man. I'd like to say the story ended there, but it didn't. It escalated. When we got to the end of the road, I made a right turn when I should have gone left. What can I say? I am directionally challenged, and I was still a bit freaked out. Sophia told me that I'd gone the wrong way, and I just waited to find a driveway to use to turn around. Sophia and I were joking around at this point, trying to come up with an explanation for what had just happened. It was probably just someone who lived down the road and somehow saw us and was trying to tell us to get the fuck out. It might have actually been a couple of people trying to go down the road, and we only saw the man get out, maybe? However, all of these hopes flew out the window when we passed by the turn to get onto the haunted road. Stopped right at the turn was that bright blue truck. And when we passed by him, it floored it behind us and followed us. We were full on terrified at this point. If they left just like this, there was no way that it could have been thrill seekers, and it probably wasn't someone who lived down the road. If they were, then why the hell would they have followed us? It was also very obvious that it was my car. My car is a distinctive shade of red, and our windows were still fogged up. I rolled down the windows. It was still cold as shit, but I needed to air them out and get rid of the fog. We were going down a deer-infested country road after all. This whole time, the truck was still right on our asses. They were tailgating us the whole time. I took a lot of unnecessary turns, and sure enough, this truck was still following us. The whole time, it was only a few feet from my tail and honking its horn at us. Either this was the most determined, aggressive driver in history, or he was after us. Eventually, when we got back to my town and the lights of civilization, the truck peeled off and we could finally breathe again. Sophia and I left town and found a secluded spot to get dressed in privacy, and we discussed what happened. We don't know who that guy was, what he wanted, how he knew we were at the road, or what he might have been doing there in the first place. We didn't know what he would have done if he had gotten us. Nothing ever came from it, and I've never seen that same blue truck. I hope that I never will. So I'm currently a 24-year-old woman. This all happened about 3 years ago. I live in a very small town, like if you sneezed while driving on the highway you'd miss half of it. In this town, it's pretty much the picture of everybody knows everybody. Because of this, I've been walking around on my own since I was in middle school, and I never felt unsafe. On the day this happened, I had just been at my boyfriend's family's shop uptown, which was about 4 blocks or so from my house. I'd been talking with him and his mother, helping out in the shop a bit, and then I headed home. My boyfriend and I weren't living together. I live with my grandma and brother. When I was about 1 street away from my house, a car pulled up beside me, and it was a guy named Ben who I've known for a long time. He's a year younger than me, and his older brother was in my grade at school, so I've known him and considered him a friend since we were little. He had 2 girls in the car with him. One I knew, Carly, and one I didn't. Ben asked where I was going, and I said I was headed home. So then he offered to drive me. I'd like to pause and point out that he was driving in the opposite direction, away from my house. His grandfather and uncle live across the street from me, and he knows exactly where I live. He's been to my house multiple times to help out with small chores like shoveling snow and trimming a hedge, so he definitely knew I was almost home. Ben would have had to drive all the way around the block to take me home, and I was literally one street away from it, and I could see my house from where I was standing. So I politely declined and said it would only take me another couple of minutes to walk there. He then offered again, but instead of
"Can I give you a ride?"
it had changed to
"Just get in the car."
I started getting weird vibes, so I declined again, thanked him for the offer, wished him a good afternoon, and started walking. He then put his car in reverse and backed down the street, following me and matching my pace. Now I hear him say something to the effect of,
"Don't just walk off. Get in the fucking car right now."
It was a breezy, beautiful summer day. I had no groceries, there wasn't a cloud in the sky, and my front door was just ahead of me. And yet, Ben was insisting and even demanding that I get in his car. At this point, Carly, who was sitting in the back seat, was looking a little uncomfortable and looked like she was trying to get him to keep driving. The girl in the front, who I didn't know, was laughing her ass off, and looking back on it, she may or may not have been high or something. I kept telling Ben that I was fine and I was less than 10 yards from my front door now, but he kept insisting, swearing at me, and telling me,
"Get in the fucking car or else."
Luckily, a truck drove up just then, and Ben had to drive away because he had pulled to the wrong side of the road to talk to me, and he was blocking the road. I ran the rest of the way home and texted my boyfriend everything that just happened from the safety of my bedroom. I didn't tell my grandma just then because she was napping and I didn't want to wake her up. Now, remember how I said I'd been at my boyfriend's mum's shop about 4 blocks away? Well, my boyfriend was at my front door in about 5 minutes. He, like me, doesn't really drive. He ran the entire way, wanting to make sure that things were okay. Apparently, Ben had had some issues in the past that I didn't know about. I met my boyfriend out front and told him again everything that had happened. I kid you not, as we stood on my front lawn talking, I looked up the street I had just walked down and I saw Ben's car pull up to the 4-way stop there, facing my street. He just sat there for a few minutes, no blinker on, no indication of moving. Then without signalling, he made a turn and vanished. Just a few minutes later, he appeared on the opposite side of my street, cruising very slowly right past the empty lot next to my house. I was really freaking out, and then he showed up on the turnoff directly across the street from my front lawn. He pulled up in front of my boyfriend and me. My boyfriend put himself between us as Ben rolled down his window and started saying he really wanted to talk to me. The 2 girls were still with him, and now Carly looked really uncomfortable but wasn't saying anything. The other one was still grinning and laughing. My boyfriend was yelling at Ben to back off and leave me alone. Ben was yelling that he wasn't doing anything to me. I had by then moved from freaked out to full-on scared. My boyfriend was demanding to know why Ben was circling my house, and Ben claimed he hadn't been doing that. Now, my grandma called me back inside because the phone was ringing and it woke her up. I go in, and it's Carly calling from inside the car. For some reason, instead of rolling down a window and talking to me, she had called my home phone to explain to me that Ben was just picking up a friend who lived down the turnoff. He wasn't circling your place. She said this even though there was no one new in the car with them, so who the fuck was he picking up, Carly? I hung up and went back outside where my boyfriend and Ben were still having a shouting match. Eventually Ben drove off. My boyfriend stuck around for a while to keep an eye out, but then he needed to get back to the shop to help his mum. He told me to call if Ben came back and to call the cops if we needed to. Literally not 20 minutes after my boyfriend left, Ben pulled up in front of my house again. This time the girls were both gone and it was just him. He knocked at my door, and I was so genuinely terrified that I hid where he couldn't see me through the door, and my grandma answered. Now, my grandma raised 6 kids, including me and my brother. She's worked retail, been a single mother, and dealt with all manner of assholes. She doesn't take any crap from anyone, and is a literal fucking tank when it comes to her kids. So the instant she pulled the door open, she started screaming at him that if he didn't leave me the fuck alone, she was going to call the cops, as well as tell everyone in his family what he was doing to me. He started spouting some lame excuse about how it was only a joke, and he was just kidding around. He also kept saying that he wanted to talk to me, and asking her to let me outside to talk. I was still hiding at this point, in tears and shaking, and my grandma tore into him, telling him she didn't care if it was just a joke. He was stalking me. He had threatened me. He was harassing me by continuing to come to our home. If he didn't get off our property in the next 60 seconds, she was calling the police. He did leave then, but for the next month or more, I was literally terrified of running into him alone again. If I went anywhere, I had someone come with me, and I didn't walk anywhere for weeks. I later found out that he had shown up at my boyfriend's mom's shop later that day, but my boyfriend and his brother had just yelled him out. I'm not sure if maybe Ben thought I'd be there, or if he was just trying to convince them that it was just a joke. My boyfriend made sure to let him know that if he ever did something like that again, he'd regret it. To this day, I've never gone or stayed anywhere with Ben where it was just him and me. Anytime I run into him on a quiet street, I say a quick hello and keep walking, keeping my phone in my hand, ready to dial someone. I honestly to this day don't know if he really was just kidding and had a sick sense of humour. Maybe he was planning something darker. Maybe I just overreacted. Either way, it was a really scary situation to be in, especially coming from someone I'd considered to be a friend for most of my life. I don't know if I'll ever consider him a friend again, or if I'll always be looking over my shoulder around him. At the time of this story, I was 18 years old, and I'm female. I was more than excited to get away from my dinky hometown and go to college. I ended up going to a small school about 2 hours away from my parents with 2 of my best friends. From the first day, I knew that college was going to be the best 4 years of my life. We stayed up late drinking and meeting other people on our floor who we eventually became lifelong friends with as well. I felt a new sense of freedom being away from my emotionally abusive parents, and a sense of completion surrounded by my closest friends all the time. The second weekend of college, my roommate and I had a party. We had about 8 people in the room and we were having a blast. We all took a few shots, watched some crappy reality TV, and played board games. I remember at one point looking around at all my friends laughing. Joy was in the air, and it was possibly one of the warmest and fuzziest moments I've ever had. As my excitement intensified throughout the night, I started to get a little antsy. I suggested to one of my new friends that we go outside and explore the campus. Everyone in their drunk minds thought it was a great idea, and we all drunkenly stumbled out of the building. We were all extremely loud and obnoxious, but we were all freshmen in college, drunkest we had ever been, with no one in the group even remotely sober. What's the worst that could happen? We stumbled over to the fountain a few feet from our dorm and decided to take a dip. It was a hot August night and we were all wasted, so this was probably the best idea ever in the moment. I don't remember much after the fountain, but someone suggested that we walk to McDonald's. The group that stumbled their way to the McDonald's close to campus that we had to walk on a wooded trail to get to. Someone had a blunt. I'd never smoked weed before, but I took a few hits. I remember being in absolute pure bliss. I had only had 3 shots, so I wasn't wasted, but a few hits off of my first blunt put me into possibly the happiest state I've ever been in. I literally started skipping and singing, and I ended up pretty far in front of the group before I realised that I couldn't even see them anymore in the wooded area behind me, but I could hear them laughing and talking loudly. It was very dark on this part of campus. It was surrounded by dense woods, and there was a path that led through the woods to the McDonald's and other shops and restaurants. I couldn't even see the streetlight to signal the end of the path yet, so I wasn't too close to the end of it yet. In this moment, I felt on top of the world. Usually in the dark woods, I would be scared shitless, but for some reason I was not. Combined with my new sense of self and confidence, and the perfect cocktail of substances, I just started to let go of my fear then. Fear of the dark, the fear of the future. I was having an extremely deep moment there in the woods by myself, and I really let a lot of things go in my life that were holding me back. I even shed some tears. Right as all this was happening in my head, I heard my friends coming up behind me. I decided to skip away from them and enjoy my me time going deep into thought, so I decided to skip ahead of them again. It was still dark, but I could start to see a light signaling that the trail was coming to an end and I would soon be on the sidewalk to go to McDonald's. When I came around the last corner of the trail, I saw a person standing on the trail, right in front of the streetlight. I stopped walk skipping so fast and tried to get a look at the person, but all I could make out was a silhouette of a man. I couldn't see any features. In my mind I was thinking, if I didn't have that moment just a few minutes ago, I would have run back screaming to my friends. Instead, I was really determined to put my new bravery to the test and just go up and walk past this guy. More than likely he's harmless. So I start walking up and I can see his arm moving in a steady way. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking at, and then I realized exactly what that motion looked like. It looked like he was jerking off. I stopped right there. I still couldn't see exactly what he was doing in the shadows, but I've seen this motion enough to know what he's doing. For a second, I even thought, am I so high that I'm making this up in my head? But then I realized that I can't be that crazy. The only thing I could do was run back into the woods to tell my friends what was up ahead on the trail before they walked up on him. When I got to my friends, I said, guys, stop! Stop walking! There's a fucking weirdo up near the end of the trail. I think he might be jerking off. My guy friends all of a sudden bellowed into laughter, looked at each other, and started running to the end of the trail. My other girlfriends were all surrounding me, watching the guys take off like, what the fuck? That's so weird, how is this happening? We started walking to catch up with the guys when the guys came back down the trail and said, there was no one there, you liar. Maybe you're too wasted, blah 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 blah. Of course I knew I wasn't too wasted to make that up in my head. The guy probably heard a bunch of meatheads running toward him and slipped in the woods or ran away or something. Anyway, so my friends and I get to the end of the trail and we can see the McDonald's in our sights. The guys are now walking in the front and I'm in the very back with one of my girlfriends who is asking me about what I thought I saw. I told her I thought I saw a silhouette of a dude jerking off, I freaked out and I ran back to them and that was it. It was about right then that I looked behind me back at the woods, and I noticed that there was this homeless looking person walking about 40 to 50 feet behind us, straight towards us, watching us intently. I connected the dots right there and then. That definitely had to be the guy that I saw. I told my friend to look behind, and I was confident that was probably who I saw. We sped walked to catch up to the group. All I could do was watch this guy to make sure he didn't do anything crazy, and I didn't want to bring it up to the guys because they would probably make a loud, unnecessary drunk scene. We then discovered that half of our group was still soaking wet from the fountain, and their shoes had water in them still, so they weren't allowed in the McDonald's. So we walked through the drive-thru to get our food. While they're on order number 3 for our group, the homeless-looking person comes into view around the corner and is just staring at us. Super creepy, super intently. I'm the only one to notice him, and I keep staring back just to watch what he's doing. He just sits there staring. When they get to the last order, he starts licking his lips and fidgeting a lot. By this point, I point out what he's doing to the friend I've been talking throughout all of this. All of a sudden, the guy just comes from around the corner and starts walking towards us. By this point, everyone in the group notices him and stops talking to see what he's doing. He then pulls down his sweatpants so he's exposing his whole package. Everyone in my group lets out some kind of what the fuck type sound, and then he starts jerking off super fast while giving us all super crazy eyes. Then, while still jerking off, he runs at full waddle sprint toward one of my girlfriends. She starts screaming bloody murder and starts running away. My guy friends run after him at full sprint. He puts his pants back up quickly and starts running too. He runs into the woods before my guy friends can get to him. I start looking around and realize that my girlfriend who was running away actually ran away and I couldn't find her anywhere. This girl was probably the drunkest out of everyone, so we started to get really worried and wondered where she went to. We started screaming her name and went in all directions trying to find her until someone found her huddled behind a dumpster, scared out of her mind. We later found out she had some serious sexual issues, and it turned the situation really sad really fast when she started crying. We pushed one of those campus police buttons and got a cop to escort us back to our dorm. We ended up staying up all night sharing our worst experiences to make her feel better. We became the closest of friends up until this very day. My flatmate is from Berlin and we live in the UK. A group of 8 of us, all aged 19 to 21, travelled to Berlin with her a year ago. On our last night, we went to a locals pub. 2 of us speak Deutsch fluently and the rest have basic conversational skills, so we were okay somewhere non-touristy. I had the basic knowledge, I'm not fluent. Halfway through the night, this man came up and is stroking all the women on the back and around the front, etc. We all pulled away and told him to back off, and the fluent speakers told him he needed to keep it to himself. He backed off for a while, then started fixating on one girl in our group. Let's call her Kate. He's all over Kate to the point where one of our more intimidating male friends decided it was time to say it was his girlfriend, to maybe make it easier for him to understand to leave her alone. This man goes and buys 2 drinks. He takes them into the bathroom and then comes out and gives one to Kate. Our male friend gives it back to him and says, "You drink it. If you want her to drink it, then you drink it." The guy is not okay with this, but when he refuses, my friend says, "Why? Have you spiked it?" To prove he hasn't spiked it, I guess, he eventually drinks it. So after 30 minutes or so, it's very clear that this man is roofied. Or at least he's high on something that he wasn't high on before. We're really mad. That's fucking disgusting. We try to leave and he's following us. He keeps telling us we need to go back with him. He offers us lots of smokes and booze and says he'll pay the taxi there and back. I say yes, I'm from a big city, I understand the dangers of stuff like this, but with 8 other people and this man basically reduced to a man-child, I figure we can put him to bed. We can easily control him, and if we want, we can rob his booze for trying to spike our friend with something. Maybe this is a moral grey zone, but to be honest, fuck him and his stuff, the predatory fuck. I know not to go into dangerous situations, but I figured if I caught a vibe, I can immediately leave and get a taxi back. It'll be cheaper because he was en route home and he was paying. We can just stand in the hall, grab his booze, and then fuck off. As we're all agreeing, I suddenly back out on this idea. I tell my friends they need to back out too. We'd come all the way to Berlin because we'd had a stressful, very sad situation in the UK. Suddenly, I don't want to rob some predatory fuck. I just want to drink some street beers and watch the city. I explain to the guys that are still going the dangers, and they don't care. Me and 2 others stay. After 3 hours, me and the 2 others check our phones and realise we have missed calls. We have the keys to the flat. We get back, and all our friends had managed to get back okay. Apparently, as they got back, the guy got weird and violent towards his flatmate and them. They nabbed some booze and smokes and ran out of there quick. There's so much more to say, but I wasn't actually there, so I'll save it. Just, this guy was really fucking bizarre. We sit on the balcony. It's about 9 AM now, and we watch people going to school and work and drink some beers. Some of us go to sleep, but I couldn't. 4 of us were up. As me and a friend are going to get another drink, someone knocks on the door. Worried we're being too loud for 9 AM or we were loud last night, I quickly go and grab it, asking my fluent friend to come because obviously I can't speak German well. As soon as I open the door, before I say anything, this man begins speaking English, weird for a German in Germany. The dude says,
"I can hear you mocking me when I play CSGO."
He is convinced he can hear us mocking him while he's playing CSGO. He keeps saying if we have something to say, we should say it to him. And then he starts saying this.
I thought we were friends. We're supposed to be friends. Why would you do this to a friend?
To reiterate, the girl whose flat this was had never met this man either. No one knew him. He wasn't the man from the pub last night. He said things to that extent over and over. Me and my friend are explaining that if we were loud, we're sorry, but we don't know him. We've never met him. We're not taking the piss out of him for playing CSGO. He starts demanding we let him inside. The door is on a chain latch, and as we try to close it, he puts his foot in so we can't. My friend calmly explains to him that it is on a string latch and that we're happy to let him in, but he needs to let us close it to open it. He reluctantly does, and we close and bolt it. We weren't going to open it. We say through the door we'll keep the noise down, and he just says, "No, you need to let me in." We both walk back. He's knocking persistently for about 10 minutes. We assume he will get bored. Then the knocking stops. About 5 minutes after it stops, I'm walking to the toilet, which is by the front door. As I walk past the front door, the knocking starts again. It's really shutting me up, to be honest. Clearly he's either watching the shadows or listening for noise. Fine, he'll get bored. For the next 30 minutes, he's knocking whenever we walk past there, then it's quiet for a while. We assume he's left, and Kate wants to make sure, so she walks up to the door and puts her eye up to the peephole. She gasps and jumps. The knocking starts again, even harder than before. She comes back and explains that when she looked through, he was trying to look through the peephole from the other side of the door. Obviously you can't see much, if anything, but she was scared when she saw him so close up. We wait. 30 minutes after this, we go check again. Now he's sat on the staircase staring at the wall by the door. He's pulling his hair with his hands and looking very angry. We wait. 15 minutes after this, we check, and he is pacing up and down, still very angry and distressed. 15 minutes after that, we check again, and he's no longer there. We never called the police for any of this because we aren't the kind of people who think to do that. It might have helped, but I always think of it as the very last resort. I go out to have a cigarette on the balcony because I was stressed from all of this. Surprising. I crack a beer and watch the people on the street. I wave at a few people that see me, and some wave back. After a while, there is a man stood on the opposite side of the street, smiling this big massive smile, waving at me. I wave back, and he doesn't start walking anywhere. He just stands there, smiling, waving, staring. After realizing this is odd, I suddenly recognize him as the man who just left from trying to get in. This is the first good look I'm getting at him. Not through a door or a peephole. He looks very put together and is dressed well, which terrifies me even more. I stand up and back towards the door a little. He smiles bigger and finally walks down the street, looking back frequently. I was absolutely sure he was going to buy a gun. I don't know why, and I was almost definitely wrong, but I was just so sure. I was so glad we were leaving that day. So, as far as I know, this was two separate strange men in one night, but as it was recently pointed out to me, that's statistically improbable. My gut tells me that it was connected. What do you think? To the man who roofied himself trying to drug my friend and then became violent, let's never meet again. And to the man who tried to get into our flat for over an hour because he thought we were mocking his CSGO ability, and then smiled so intensely it actually managed to frighten me. Please, let's never meet again.